Welcome to the Soul Talk podcast. I'm Marybeth Rim, a mental health provider and coach. This podcast explores the mind, body, and spirit connection to support your wellness journey. However, it's not a substitute for medical care or therapy. So let's dive in. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Marybeth Rim, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker who's worked in the mental health space for almost 30 years. And today I am incredibly grateful and a privilege to introduce a very special guest, Dr. Laurie Rothman. Would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners? Because I really would love them to hear about your background and especially your experience with supporting both, the physical and the mental health space. So it's really valuable to have your perspective on setting good healthy holiday expectations.
Sure. Hey, thank you so much for having me, Marybeth. This is really fun. My name is Dr. Laurie Rothman. I am a family physician. I have been practicing for just about 25 years now. And my focus is on taking care of families, specifically now adolescents and adults through into older adulthood. Um, as a family doctor, I like to focus on patients' physical and mental well-being because what we find is that you really can't separate the two. If someone is having undue stress in their life, if they're suffering from a mental health disorder like anxiety, depression, OCD, it absolutely affects their physical health. That also being said, all of their physical issues, if they have a new serious diagnosis or if they're suffering from a chronic illness, that affects their mental health. So we need to look at both together. One fun fact that a lot of people don't know is that primary care doctors, like family physicians and internists, take care of more of the mental health in this country than psychiatrists and psychologists. And a big part of the reason for that is we're kind of like the first line of defense. Patients tend to see us first. They may come in and say, I'm having migraines, or I'm having irritable bowel symptoms, or I'm feeling so tired, not realizing that a lot of the triggers for their symptoms might be stressors in their lives or some mental health concerns. So we're one first line because sometimes it's not even recognized that there's a mental health issue going on. And we're just really underserved when it comes to mental health care in the United States. So even the patients who know that they need counseling or a psychiatrist don't always have access to one, either geographically or financially.
No, absolutely agree. And I also noticed that, like in mental health, is that they'll go to their doctor first and then they'll wait and they just wait and wait and wait, thinking that it's going to get better, and then they can come into therapy later on. So thank you for that. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a statistic at my fingertips, but I can just tell you from my experience that, I make mental health counseling referrals all the time. And when patients come back to me like, hey, did you ever see that counselor I told you about? Did you ever go consult with a psychiatrist or psychologist? And it's more times than not. No, I haven't done that yet. I didn't get to it. I wasn't sure. And sometimes it takes at least 2 or 3 visits before I can actually get someone to do it, unless there is, a life-threatening crisis.
Right. And I'm not sure
And
why.
that's a subject for a whole other podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That's like, definitely, for sure. Because I think it's important to get people to understand and be educated on really the benefits of mental health counseling. It's so important because
What you do is so important, Maria.
And what you do is really important because together, working together and with that it's really needed. So, but yeah, let's kind of jump into what we're going to be talking about today. Actually, this episode actually marks the beginning of like a 3-part series, which is focused on creating a healthy, balanced holiday season. So as we know, the holidays, they can really be a time of joy and connection, but also it brings up some really unique challenges, from like managing expectations to, maintaining our mental and physical well-being. So,
Yeah, I mean, there have actually been studies that have shown that most people feel more stressed during the holiday season, particularly starting in right about now. Like we're right now at the beginning of November, and that's when people start to feel more stressed. And in particular, women tend to bear the brunt of that burden in terms of stress.
Oh yeah, because we like gather everybody together. We do all the cooking, all the cleaning, and making sure we serve everybody, making sure that everybody is, you know, happy. And then
But you know what? I honestly like those technical things that you just described are absolutely true. But I think that the stress of being the one in terms of planning is the biggest stressor.
it is.
Like the mental stress of trying to figure out who's going to be where when and balancing everyone's needs and planning the menu and planning the shopping. Like before you actually even get to the doing, the planning is so stressful.
Oh, it is, and it's like and also setting the timing because it's really interesting because like every holiday, I have to tell my daughter to be here an hour before everybody else gets here because she's
Mm-hmm.
always an hour late. And so
She's chronically late.
chronically late. So she'll show up and nobody's here and she's like, "You tricked me again." I'm like, "No,
And
I
you're like,
just
yep.
know that you're always an hour late because we're sitting there, the food is getting cold and we're just waiting and waiting. I'm like, "Okay, are you there? Are you there yet? Are you coming? Are you coming?" Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So my oldest son needs kind of like that 15 to 30 minute like little bit of lie.
Yeah, exactly.
So okay, we're starting at 6:30, and okay, we're really planning on starting at 7, but this way I'll give him a little grace period to get himself there on time, and like no ill intentions, just kind of the kind of person who's just cutting it all to the last moment.
Right. And that's pretty much what I do. It's like, okay, I know that you're late, so I'll give you kind of like this time to get here. And usually, most of the time, she's there on time if I tell her between this time and this time
Right.
when everybody else is coming.
Because you're there like arriving earlier on time.
Exactly.
But I think the other element of stress, other than the planning, which is big, is expectations.
Absolutely.
You know, setting like what are your expectations for yourself? What are everyone else's expectations for you and for what it quote unquote should be? And not realizing that like we can create something that we want, not a cookie cutter version of what we think it should be.
Right. And I think it's really more about connecting with your family and your friends. That's really should be the number one focus. I mean, everything else is great. I mean, like the meal, the china, the decorations or whatever. That's all great, but it's really the connection to
Mm-hmm.
the people that come
I
here.
agree. What I was thinking about when we were talking about doing this was is okay, well what's the focus? And I think that like what we all need to do, like myself included, is try and decide, well, what does this holiday mean to me? And what are my goals for it? What am I trying to achieve? And am I trying to achieve connectedness with my family? That's probably the most important thing. Am I trying to create a memory for my children? Absolutely. And then figuring out what the goals are, and then going back and designing the holiday about the goals, not just trying to like be the perfect hostess.
Exactly. And what happens? Tell us what happens when we get overstressed by all of this burnout and all of this sense of overwhelmingness that we feel that we have to put on this perfect holiday for not only ourselves but for everybody else. What happens?
I mean, I mean things. I think things happen physically and things happen mentally. Physically, our body starts to get overstressed and overwhelmed. We end up, if we have a chronic medical condition, like diabetes or asthma or COPD or hypertension, we can actually make those much worse. You can have increases in blood sugar with stress. Asthma can be set off, and then it makes it harder to function. I mean, also, like if your blood pressure is increasing, putting yourself at risk for increased cardiovascular risk.
Yeah,
You mentioned the word, so that's really important. I mean, to slow down and make sure that no matter what else you're doing, that you're taking care of your health, that you're taking your medications regularly, that you're doing all of the normal routine things you do to be healthy. Because we don't want something that's supposed to bring positivity and joy into our lives to start causing harm.
exactly.
And then I think psychologically, like you mentioned the word burnout, and burnout happens for different reasons. It happens professionally, it happens personally. But I think this kind of social burnout during the holidays can cause us to kind of turn our empathy off, which is really what the definition of burnout is when we don't care anymore and shut down. And you could probably speak to that as a therapist.
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself that I've really, I mean, I used to do all the crazy stuff, you know. I mean, I would do all of the planning, all of the making sure everybody was, you know, where they needed to be, making sure everybody was having a good time, serving them. And by the end of I noticed like the last few years of doing that, I'd be so exhausted. I'm just like, and it's, you know, and especially when, you know, they all come over to eat and then nobody would help, and then they had, you know, they come and they eat, and then it's like, oh, I have someplace else better to go, and then they they leave you with a whole pile of
Right. And then like, and your expectation was like this gathering of either family or friends and the connectedness. And then all of a sudden everyone's gone and you're left with a big mess.
yeah. And we used to sit, you know, we used to have fun because we would we'd always play like card games or board games and things like that when the kids were little. And now that they're older, they still like to do that type of stuff, and we still do that type of stuff, especially around like Christmas. Because I decided that, okay, we're going to keep it really simple. We're not going to go out and spend massive amounts of money on
Hmm.
stuff that people don't want or need. You know, so we'll just buy like little gifts, you know, 2 or 3 gifts, and we'll put them in a pile, and they're not for anybody in particular. And we'll play a game. Usually we play like Texas Hold'em or something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love this.
and everybody gets the same amount of gifts. They may not like what they get, but they can always swap it if they want. But it makes it fun because you're not. And I always put a limit. I was like, okay, no more than $25 to $30, and
Right.
it's been working the last few years. So it's like, let's keep it simple because they have everything.
And it also takes like, okay, so you addressed a lot of issues in that. Like you addressed, well, one, it's not all about the consumerism. It's about, picking out something that's fun and then making an activity and connecting through the activity.
Right.
And it's not just all about the food, which the food is great. I mean, it's wonderful to have holiday food and traditions, but I mean, how long does it take to sit around and eat? And then it's over. So to have an activity connected to it is wonderful. I really love that. I went to a Christmas celebration a few years ago with my significant other, and they did where everyone brought one gift and they played a game, and then whoever won that round of the game would pick out their gift, and it was really fun, and it was no pressure to buy 30 gifts,
Right.
and it made it fun, and you learned a little bit about everyone while you were playing the game and connected that way. So I really like that. My family, we grew up celebrating Hanukkah. When I was younger, when I was a kid, we'd have these huge Hanukkah parties with my grandparents and my mom, and she had 3 siblings and all their kids and cousins. And the gifting was when you were a kid was really fun. I mean, we'd have these huge piles of gifts for everyone, and we'd be exchanging them. It was mostly about the kids
Right.
when for young
Yep.
kids, and that was amazing. But now, as an adult, I look back and I think that must have been a lot of pressure on all the adults who were planning.
Yeah. I'm.
But they really did create beautiful memories for us. And my cousins and I will still sit today and talk about the Hanukkah parties of our youth. But it was also the time that we always saw each other, and that it would be an all day event,
Yeah.
and we really connected as cousins.
Yeah. We used to do that as well. Like I grew up in a big Italian family, and so my
Hmm.
uncle, he had like 8 kids, and we used to
Wow.
love going over there, and especially at Christmas because he was always the one that would cook, and he'd cook like this big pasta meal, and it was a lot of fun. And we'd all get together, and and that's where my love of card playing, because my aunt loved to play cards, and we play like for pennies, play.
Right, because it wasn't about money; it
No,
was about.
yeah.
And then both sides of my family played cards. Not so my mom's family wouldn't really do it at the holidays. It was more like maybe a weekend
Yeah.
thing. But with my dad's family, we'd always play spades after the meals
We used to do that
or
too.
pinochle
Yep, we used to do that too.
or sit and play backgammon. And that I
Oh
remember
yeah.
a Christmas morning with my dad's side of the family sitting. My grandfather and I would be the first ones up, and we would be playing backgammon, waiting for everyone to wake up.
Yeah. No, those are, I mean,
And those moments are I mean, great
they
memories.
are. And it's like, what happened to all of that? Because it really was about the connection back then. I mean, we didn't really get a whole lot of gifts. I mean, we
Hmm.
would get like maybe one or two, but it wasn't anything that was like what it is today, you know?
Right. Well, with my family growing up with celebrating Hanukkah, we would have a small gift as the kids every night at Hanukkah,
Right.
and then maybe one little bit bigger gift on like the last night. But it wasn't about spending huge amounts of money. It was always cute little thoughtful things, and I've tried to bring that tradition into my family with my own children, of cute little thoughtful things. But with three kids and 8 nights, that's still 24 gifts to come up with.
Exactly. And that's why I decided, okay, we're keeping it simple. Just go and buy, I mean, last couple of years we would buy like things over at the dollar store, like kitchen stuff
Right.
or, whatever. Was it?
Or, I think gifting experiences is also a wonderful thing. My sister started doing that, where she would, gift a day at the botanical gardens or a camping trip,
Oh, I like
or
that.
something like that. Yeah, a kayaking trip. I think that's a really wonderful thing to do because you're gifting time with the person.
Oh, I like that. I mean,
Yeah, and then I have an aunt who, I'm sorry,
no, go
what
ahead.
were you
No,
saying, Mary
no,
Beth?
go ahead. I was agreeing with you.
Yeah, and then I have an aunt who a number of years ago started gifting donations in the person's name. So one year, it's like she donated something from Heifer Inc. to everyone, where we would then be responsible for having fed other people who needed it.
That's awesome. So, what do you think? What kind of priorities that can people set for realistic expectations as we kind of wrap this up today? What do you think would be some
Yeah,
good practical?
I
I mean, we talked about some really good ones. Like prioritizing, setting boundaries. Um, what type of self care do you recommend?
In terms of self-care, I definitely recommend looking at your life. Okay, well, what are my responsibilities in terms of work, in terms of childcare, in terms of elder care? Because we all have different things we're responsible for. Looking at your time constraints and then your financial constraints, and planning something that's realistic. Because if you start planning way outside those boundaries, it's going to be stressful and it's going to suck all the joy out of it. So plan something smaller and more meaningful, and ask other people to bring things. Do a potluck. Don't do everything yourself. I love the idea of having everyone bring one gift and then doing some kind of white elephant or game. But working within the constraints of the reality of your life so you don't put undue pressure on yourself and on others, because you really don't know what the other people in your lives are going through either.
That's right, exactly. So pretty much you want to focus
And then from
on,
a therapist's point of view,
yeah, you don't want to focus on perfection. You want to focus.
exactly, because it's not about the perfection. It's about the fun. It's about the love. It's about the meaning, the spiritual meaning of the holiday that you're celebrating. If you're spiritual, religious that way,
ex-
I mean, there's so many things that we can latch onto that are
and
beautiful
it's about
and that we
it's
can use to promote our physical health
and it's about being
rather
genuine,
than take away from it.
right? It's about
Absolutely.
being genuine with each other and really caring. Um, that's really important to me. Is
And there was one thing
yeah,
yeah, I couldn't agree more. There was one thing I thought of, and before we started this, and it's the power to say no. And it's okay
yep,
if you feel like you're being overextended. It's okay to say no. Like, you have to take care of yourself. You don't have to go to every holiday party. You don't have to go to every celebration. You say no without an excuse. You don't have to make up an excuse. No, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. No, thank you so much for the invitation, but I can't make it.
yeah. I always say
And that's very empowering, knowing that you're allowed to say no.
no is a complete sentence.
I like that. No, thank you.
That's what I always say. No is a complete sentence. It's okay to say no,
Oh, I love that.
and
That's
because
great.
that's what a lot of people really struggle with when they come when they come in for therapy is just like why can't you say no? It's well, I can't do that because it'll
Like, we forget that we can, that we
right,
are in charge of ourselves.
exactly,
And we want to, be loving and caring and empathetic towards the people in our lives. But at the end of the day, if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be there for anyone else.
No,
So I think that's, my take home message would be, set reasonable expectations, focus on what matters to you, and you're the only one who can decide what the most important elements are, and that it's okay to say no.
right, exactly. So, as we wrap up today, I'd really like to encourage everybody to take a moment, and really think about your expectations for this holiday season. What does it mean to you? What are the things that truly bring you joy and fulfillment? And how you can set those realistic goals and prioritize your well-being rather than aiming for perfection, and kind of consider letting go, like you were talking about, saying no. That's really important. That's really, really important. You know,
I like it.
yeah, I mean, again, thank you so much for joining me today.
This has been so fun. It's been such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the next
Yeah,
one.
and I really hope that everybody found some helpful insights to guide you through the holidays with intention and ease. So until next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Soul Talk podcast. Remember, every step you take brings you closer to a healthier, more balanced life. Keep investing in yourself, stay mindful, and join us next time as we continue the journey. Until then, keep moving.